I'm Genevieve Randall with Nebraska Public Media. So pleased to support Lincoln Symphony Orchestra with these pre-concert chats. A reminder that some of LSO's concerts can be heard statewide on our occasional series, Nebraska Concerts. So hopefully you can look for this particular concert at some point in the future. Now, I am joined here by our guest soloist for this particular concert titled Melodies from Spain, which, if you're watching this earlier in the week before the concert, is coming up Saturday, October 26th at the Lead Center for Performing Arts at 7:30 p.m. You might be watching this directly ahead of that event. So, we've got a variety of people watching the pre-concert chat. But the guest soloist tonight is Diane Barger, who I just, have to brag on a little bit here. She can be she can be heard on several recordings. She is a busy lady. If you read her bio, you will see that she has been involved in much chamber music over the ages. She can be featured on an album, for example, of operatic fantasies. That's not what it sounds like to many people. It's like opera melodies, but like in fantasies for clarinet, which is kind of cool. Modern music by current composer Scott McAllister on her album Bling Bling. Also an album called Conversations with Friends with some chamber music, and her Amakidia duo album Play Pretty, and so much more, so much more. She performs regularly with Moran Woodwind Quintet, and she's in the symphony, but here we get to hear her as a soloist tonight. Diane, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Your intro has made me use up half of our pre-concert chat. I'm so sorry.
I love it.
I'm kidding. And our beloved maestro, Ed Polachek. Ever great to see you, Ed.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
So, Melodies from Spain. This is going to be fun. We've got music by Manuel de Falla. We have this very interesting concerto, which I want to dive into first here. And then we will also hear music by Bizet and Rimsky-Korsakov. And someone is like, wait, Rimsky-Korsakov doesn't sound Spanish, but we'll get to that.
Neither does Bizet, right?
Neither does Bizet, right? Georges Bizet. Yeah, that's not especially Spanish. So, Diane, tell me about this Navarro concerto.
Yeah, when Ed asked me to solo, I was thinking, okay, what would I want to do? And this concerto came to mind after I did a masterclass of all things in Kansas a year ago, September, and somebody played this piece and I had forgotten about it. And I love the E flat clarinet. That is my auxiliary instrument. And, with my Amakitia duo, we've been trying to increase the repertoire for use of that instrument in chamber music, because it's usually just an orchestral color instrument. But Oscar Navarro was a genius, and he grew up as a clarinetist in Spain, and now he's known mainly as a composer and conductor. But this was his third concerto that he wrote for Belgian clarinetist David van Melle. And David plays in the Royal Symphonic Band of the Belgian Guides. And this is the only concerto that I am aware of that uses B flat and E flat clarinet. So that in itself makes this truly unique. And I'm going back and forth constantly between the two instruments, sometimes with a 3.5 measure little break. So they're quick little changes, but throughout, it's basically a 3 movement concerto without pause. The outer 2 movements are super exciting. In the first movement, you'll hear some Latin rhythms. In the last movement, he mixes some Arabic music and ostinato passages. And in the second movement, which I think is one of the most special movements, and I might get a little teary just even talking about it. This was written, Oscar explains it as basically it takes us, it's an inspired by a voyage to the great beyond, to a paradise, and this I'm quoting him, where those who have already left rest and where the children fill the horizon with smiles. So really it transports us into your idea of what heaven is and where we go when we pass away. And after writing it, Oscar told David that he wrote this especially in memory of David's son, Mateo, who passed away at the age of 6. And so, knowing that's not in the program notes, and that makes it even more special, I reached out to David and he told me that story. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be thinking of my mom and dad, who, always told me to play pretty. Before every concert, I have that inscribed on my clarinet ligature, the part that holds the reed on my mouthpiece. And I literally rub that little passage before every performance, and I think of my mom and dad. I will be thinking of them in this second movement.
Oh, for sure. That just gives me goosebumps, Diane.
It's
Just amazing. I love that you shared about the inscription on your clarinet. I wonder for listeners who don't really know that much about clarinet, if you could maybe briefly describe what difference does it make to switch between the B flat and the E flat? What's the difference in sound? And does it
Yeah.
require you as the player to do something differently as you play? I know from flute to piccolo, it is different physically.
Yeah. It's more similar than going from soprano to bass clarinet. Bass clarinet is really a different animal, much more open, different voicing. The E flat clarinet, you kind of see my clarinets behind me on pegs. The E flat clarinet is shorter, much like the flute to piccolo, and it's a perfect fourth higher than the soprano B flat clarinet. So it will sound higher, and he actually exploits that register a lot. Everything that's written for the E flat clarinet in this particular concerto is pretty big. The second movement, you don't hear the E flat clarinet at all, which is
I wondered, yeah,
you
I
know?
wondered with all the
Yeah.
emotion there, I wondered how he used it as color.
Yeah. So, but my approach to playing E flat clarinet is that I want it to sound like a soprano clarinet. I don't want it to be shrill. E flat gets a bad rap, but it can be played. My clarinet repairman years ago told me, "You're the only E flat clarinet player that who doesn't use the instrument like a weapon." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." So, so my approach is, to play it just like my soprano. I do have to, it's a smaller aperture for the embouchure. I have to hold it a little bit closer to get the voicing just right. And yeah, the higher it is, the more embouchure support, is needed. But I just love the little beast, and it acts as the protagonist throughout the entire concerto.
Oh, so we have characters.
Yeah, yeah. Oscar Navarro is also a major film composer. And I think you can hear that in this music without a question. Without a question.
Cool. So Ed, I'm wondering if you were familiar with this particular concerto before.
Just a little bit. I had a doctoral student years ago who played Oscar's first concerto, which was, it's terrific. It's awesome. That one was written for band, but there's also transcription for orchestra. And then the second concerto I've also listened to, that's written for clarinet and orchestra, but there's also a band transcription. And this concerto also has a band transcription, but it's written for symphony orchestra first. So, and again, just, I heard it in that master class from a student, because they knew, oh, an E flat player is coming and they wanted to play something with E flat. And I thought, oh, this is such a great piece, and I think our Lincoln audiences will eat it up. It
I
is
agree.
just exciting and beautiful and gorgeous. It will transcend the listener.
So with thinking about color, Ed, I would love to hear about what the rest of the orchestra is doing as they play along with what's going on in the clarinet solo.
It's a large orchestration. First of all, I was thrilled that you brought up the fact that, a lot of people who don't really, when we think of clarinet, I think the go-to instrument is the B flat clarinet, because if people have had any association with it, playing it in high school band or whatever, it's almost always the B flat clarinet. There is the E flat, there's also the A, the clarinet in A. and then the bass clarinet, and there's a contrabass clarinet. There are all these, it's pretty amazing family within itself. But I do want to say that one of the things that has always struck me about Diane's playing is that, I mean, her incredible technique and her musicianship, it goes without saying, but her tone is one of the most full, has this dark quality with tremendous overtones, and to make that happen on a B flat and then even to extend it further onto the E flat clarinet, to me, is extremely special. So in a way, I think that Oscar Navarro might have written this clarinet for you, Diane. But to get back to your question, he is a brilliant orchestrator, and the fact that Oscar Navarro is also a very, very fine conductor bespeaks the way he knows how to write a score, how he knows how to write for instruments, how he can reinforce the color of the solo instrument, as well as helping to expand it and give it a foundation. It is a piece that I have to say that I didn't have to listen to mainly more than even 30 seconds to a minute when I said, this piece is incredible. And I decided that this is the one that it's going to be. But when I got to the second movement, it just brought tears to my eyes. It's interesting that so much of, let's say, contemporary music, or what people think of as contemporary or modern music from the 20th through the 21st century, there's such a spectrum of kinds of music, and it tends to get compartmentalized in certain ways. But this music is of the highest form of kind of classical music, with this sophisticated aspect of the contemporary, as well as this ethnic aspect of the Spanish. And Diane, you had brought up the fact that there's this, because he mentions that there's an Arabian influence, Arabic influence in the, I think it's partly to do with meters and also the modes of what goes on. That's a big part of what Spanish music is all about in many ways, because there was the Moorish influence on Spain, and it had its ramifications in the way Spanish music, quote unquote, developed over the centuries,
Yeah, it really gives it a unique sound, which I think
Yes.
is interesting to think about, where the Bizet music comes in with music from Carmen and the Rimsky-Korsakov
Exactly.
Espanol, because they're looking for those particular things that give it that flavor.
Well, that goes to the reason why once I fell totally head over heels with this Oscar Navarro concerto, it sparked a program that had so many possibilities. And I finally settled on the aspect of what the various influences that Spain had in other cultures, and how it infiltrated other cultures, because Bizet, of course, is French, and Carmen is about as well, we all know what Carmen is about. I mean, it's just one of my favorite operas of all time. But it gives the kind of the French spin on what Bizet had in mind in doing that. Now, this whole thing in terms of Moorish influence also goes back to the time of Mozart, with the abduction from the Seraglio. There was a kind of a very special fascination with the rhythms, the sounds, the modes of that. And then I thought, why not include the Russian aspect of that with Capriccio Espagnolo of Rimsky-Korsakov? And by the way, Defia's, we're going to do the suite number 2 from the Three-Cornered Hat. He was Spanish, born in Spain, but of Catalonian, I think, descent. And then during the revolution, he became an expat and moved to Argentina and stayed there. They wanted to bring him back to the country, but he said, no, it's not the Spain that I remember. So you have that kind of South American influence of things. It's a program that's really very universal, and I just love this program. And it all happened. It's all Diane's fault because she introduced me to the Oscar Navarro
All your
concerto.
fault, Diane.
There we
I
go.
love it. I'll take it. I'll take the
You'll
blame.
take it. Yeah. It's a great program. It really
Oh,
is.
all of this looks like so much fun. I can't help but wonder, Diane, then what you get to do during the rest of the concert. It's a lot to play a concerto. And often if you get a guest soloist from someplace else coming into town or whatever, that's the piece they're going to play. And then they're resting during the rest of the concert. But
Yeah,
you're part of the symphony.
I am. So I'm not playing the first piece.
Okay.
So I can, get ready for the concerto. And then I thought, oh, I'm gonna let, our wonderful second Jean also play the Bizet. But I had to play the Rimsky-Korsakov. I mean, there's some great clarinet solos in there. And
Amen to that.
I also
Absolutely.
made those excerpts required for my fall ensemble audition music for my students. So I was like, oh, they need to hear it, live. So
There you go. There you
so,
go. It's
yeah.
brilliant. It's brilliant. It's
I
just
did,
brilliant.
I did find myself also wondering, Diane, about that aspect of teaching and performing. And, in your long accolades, you're an adjudicator often. And I thought, well, I wonder if she turns this on herself. Like, how much does teaching affect how you play and perform?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it directly both of them influence each other. I just did an orchestral rep class for 6 of my students last spring, and we studied 8 of the major, clarinet orchestral pieces that had, and this was one of them, the Rimsky-Korsakov. And so, I just talked them through, how, about the piece, how to practice it, how to perform it, all those things. And then that helps me, when I go into the orchestra. Okay, I got to practice what I preach. And you got to study the score and all those kinds of things. So really, they both influence each other. And I'm just so lucky to be able to do both, play in a wonderful orchestra and also teach. It's great.
So is there something, as folks are listening to the Defia, the Rimsky-Korsakov, the Bizet, and the Navarro, that we could pick out and say, oh, that's Spanish? Sort of like when you taste oregano and you're like, oh, this is Italian.
Well, I can answer part of that. That there are things called modes that if you start on the C on the piano and you go up from C to C, that's the major mode. And then if you start on D and use only the white keys going from D to D, that's the Dorian mode. And if you start from E to E, etc. And the E to E is called the Phrygian mode. And modes have a way of being very recognizable by the intervals where the whole steps and the half steps come in the 8-note scale. And Spanish music basically is based on the Phrygian mode, which has that half step right at the very beginning between the first and the second notes. And that when you hear that, you don't say, I'm sure you don't say, oh, that's Phrygian, but you might say that's Spanish, because it does have that. And I've often wondered if that did not even have come from the Moorish influence in Spain. I don't know. I haven't. I'm not educated enough to know that, but I do know that it's one of the things that is there. The other thing, obviously, is the kinds of rhythms that you hear in Spanish dances, and the way that is incorporated with the mode, etc. But those rhythms are also, and probably a lot of it comes from the guitar playing, the flamenco thing, and the dance thing. It's actually fascinating, and you will hear all of that throughout the entire program in different forms. That's what's so fascinating to me about this program.
Beautiful, beautiful. Between rhythm and modes, I love it. We're going to listen to all the flavor.
Yeah, there you go.
I was going to ask you if there was something special that you could tell us about your clarinets, but you already told us that it's engraved with something that your parents used to say to you.
Yeah, not my instrument, the ligature. And again, that's a little string brass thing that holds the reed on the mouthpiece.
The metal part that holds the reed on. So maybe the clarinet itself, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the maker or where you found your two clarinets. Both
of them are Buffet Crampon clarinets. And my E-flat clarinet, I bought this E-flat clarinet back in the 1989 when I was a student of Marcellus at Northwestern. That's when I really got turned on to playing E-flat clarinet. And I found this beautiful RC Prestige Buffet Crampon clarinet. And, over the years, some people will see that, oh, it's a little bit longer. Well, because between the bell and the body of the instrument, I have what's called an extension by Clark Phobes. It has a little hole in it. And I beat myself up. I was like, why didn't you try this years ago? Because it's amazing. I've probably been using it for 15 years, but it just homogenizes the instrument. I have a different barrel that has a cutout. So I'm actually using a soprano reed on my E-flat. So, little things like that. And my B-flat clarinet, I think I've had since 2014. So, yeah. But the E-flat clarinet, he's pretty old.
I have a question for you, Diane, because I don't know this, but if the B-flat clarinet is considered the soprano clarinet, is the E-flat then a sopranino or?
Basically. Yep.
Okay, it's the higher soprano.
There's an A-flat sopranino clarinet too. Yeah, I know. Yeah. You'll see that occasionally in some clarinet choir music. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge family of instruments.
Yeah, it is. It's a family unto itself.
For sure.
Yeah. Chad, I might go Google some clarinet choir music now, because now I want to just go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, right.
Discovering all the clarinet family. Well, we've run out of time, but I'm sure we could talk forever. But it's going to be a great program with, of course, Three-Cornered Hat, Manuel de Falla. We've got Bizet and Rimsky-Korsakov bringing in the Spanish flavor as well. And the feature of this program, clarinetist Diane Barger, who is LSO's principal clarinetist, coming out to be the soloist here on Oscar Navarro's dazzling third concerto for clarinet. And as I said before, depending on when you are watching this pre-concert chat, the concert is upcoming on Saturday, October 26th at the Lead Center at 7:30, led by our maestro, Ed Polachek. Or it's in a few minutes. I don't know if you're watching right before the concert. So
I can't wait.
Thank you so much. It's going to be beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.